Okay, I see we have 65 participants now, and I want to welcome all of you for joining us here at NIFA as we continue to have our workshops for new investigators that are interested in applying for or sending applications into the AFRI program. AFRI, of course, is Agriculture and Food Research Initiative here at NIFA, and it's our premier competitive program that has several different topical areas and opportunities for you. My name's Kevin Kephart. I'm the Division Director for the Ag Systems Division. And within Ag Systems, in regard to AFRI, we have a couple different areas. One of those you'll hear about today, and that's the Agricultural Economics and Rural Communities program area. And we also have Agricultural Science and Technologies that we'll talk about tomorrow. But for today, let's focus on what we have for Ag Economics and Rural Communities. We also call that AERC. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So within the AERC area of AFRI, we have 4 program areas or program area priorities that we'll talk about today. First of all, there's the small and medium-sized farms. That's area A1601. Then there's economics, markets, and trade. That's A1641. We have rural economic development, A1661, and then finally economic and social implications of food and agricultural technologies, which is 1642. So we'll cover those in depth as we go along here today. Let's go to the next slide. And then we're also, AERC has a lot of effort and involvement in several cross-cutting programs. And you'll learn also about these interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary programs that we have within AFRI. First of all, there's A1261, which is the interdisciplinary engagement in animal systems. Secondly, critical agricultural research and extension, or A1701. You'll hear a lot later on today about data science for food and agricultural systems. That's a A1541. And then finally, tactical sciences for agricultural biosecurity. So that, in essence, is what the presentation will encompass today. Well, let's go on to the next slide. And we'll cover the first of our program areas. I'll hand it off now to Robin Shoemaker, and he'll go through the presentations. And we'll start now with small and medium-sized farms. Robin.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I'm Robin Shoemaker, National Program Leader for Economics here at NIFA. And what I want to do is describe in a little bit more detail each of the programs under the AERC program area, and give you some of the, just the highlights about the programs. Later on, I'll talk a little bit about the application process, some hints and advice along those lines. Everything that I'm going to be telling you here is printed, is in the AFRI RFA. So you can find everything you need to know there. But this is just an introduction to the basic, to the programs themselves, so you get an idea of what's in there. So I'll start with a small and medium-sized farm program. Dennis Abadabi is the NPL in charge of that, and if you're here, Dennis, you want to weigh in, you certainly can do that. But basically, the maximum request for these programs is up to $650,000 for a 3 to 5 year long project. They can be both research only or integrated projects. I mean, they just take a second to explain what that means. If you have a research only project, that means your funding will only support research. Any other extension or education activities will not be supported as a research only project. But integrated projects, on the other hand, need to include a research as well as an education or extension component to that. And ideally, extension or education plays a significant role in actually shaping what the project is about and how research can support those activities. So I just wanted to give you a little quick primer on what we mean by those types of programs, those type of projects. It also supports standard conference and phase grants, and by phase, these are strengthening grants that support new investigators, 1890s minority serving institutions, and the type of activities that are supported by that include seed grants, sabbaticals, and equipment grants. So the application deadline for the small medium-sized farm program is June 24 this year, and the same program will be available in 2022, and that will be due September 22nd. All proposals need to be in by 5/0000. So not a second later. So that's a small mid-sized farm program, a little more focused. So the purpose of the program is to support the development of adoptions or innovations that enhance the capability of small and mid-sized farms with scale appropriate strategies. For example, advance the production profitability of post-harvest handling for specialty crops or high value niche crops like hemp. Identify appropriate digital tools and technologies for small farms. Provide outreach activities and opportunities for entry-level farms for young and beginning, socially disadvantaged veterans and immigrant farmers. And also examine topics such as land tenure and issues relating to heirs property. So that's small, mid-size. The Economic Markets and Trade Program, again, program code 1641. We mentioned these program codes. It's not just NIFA code talk that we used amongst ourselves. When you apply for the a proposal, you need to include the program code, and that's really critical because when your application goes into grants.gov, that code tells it where to go, and it won't get to where it needs to be without that code. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. Again, these have a maximum funding of $650,000 for the 3 to 5 year projects, but an additional $150,000 can be requested if it involves the collaboration of a minority serving institution or EBSCOR eligible institution. These are research only projects, so they cannot include extension or education component. At least that aspect of it won't be supported. And again, there's standard conference and phase grants as in the other case. The deadlines are July 15 for this year and October 6th of next year. I'm the contact for that and am happily welcome any inquiries about the program. It's one of the best parts of the job is talking about people's research ideas. The funding priorities, the Economic Markets and Trade Program, and the short explanation is applied micro, and that should sum it up, and I can move on from there. But just I wanted to emphasize that it looks both on the supply side, ag production and markets, international trade, industrial organization of the sector, and all the input demand, the adoption of new technology, adoption, diffusion of new technologies, a lot of emphasis on policy design, developing incentive mechanisms for different types of activities. But also, it also looks on the demand side, the consumer acceptance of new and emerging projects, and a whole host of issues around that. And also want to point out that it supports research relating to environmental and natural resource economics. That program no longer exists. I won't comment on that, but applied micro includes environmental and natural resource economics. So I really want to stress that projects relating to that area will be accepted in the Markets and Trade Program.
Robin, I just wanted to jump in really quickly. I see that we have a hand raised, and I just wanted to let everyone know that if you have a question, to please type it in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. and the program specialists will be typing in answers to questions that we know. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll be reading any questions that we can't answer out loud for Robin or anyone else to jump in. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Katie. No, that's. I mean, we really want this to be interactive in that regard, so you can get as much input into what this stuff is all about as possible. So the next program is the Rural Economic Development Program. Again, this is a 1661, 650,000 for 3 to 5 year projects. And this one also invites research only or integrated projects. Actually, there was a time when we only had integrated projects, and we found we were missing some good research ideas in this area, because they are forced to, add in an extension component, which may not be appropriate for the type of research they wanted to undertake. So now we've expanded so both are available. Again, this also invites standard conference phase grants and the like. The due dates are coming up June 17th for this year and September 15th next year. And again, I'm the contact for that one. A little more detail. Supports theoretical and empirical efforts to create innovative approaches to advancing economic opportunities, economic development in rural areas. It distinguishes from some of the more agricultural-based programs. This is really looking at the rural entrepreneurs, individuals or communities beyond the farm gate. So other aspects of economic activity in rural areas. Looks at, place-making assets and cultural amenities, performing arts, various, things that can bring economic growth into rural areas. Really important aspect is focusing on persistent poverty areas and looking at what the implications of that and impact of that on various public health crises, including COVID-19 and opioid abuse and suicide, all of which are really dramatic challenges in rural areas. And another part is looking at the incentive for policy design or structures that can encourage the development and enhancement of broadband and that kind of infrastructure into rural areas. That's obviously a critical component to delivering, things like healthcare, education, and other activities. The next one is the social implications of food and agricultural technologies, 1642. This is 650,000 again, and research and integrated projects and the like. And again, I'm the contact for that. July 15th. This year's the deadline, and October 6th for next year. And just give a little background about this. I conjured up this program about 3 or 4 years ago, pretty much with the advent of genome editing and gene drives, and saw that this is a classic example of a technology that has far-reaching, very, very important contributions it can make to all aspects of life and well-being, but at the same time creates uncertainties and risks and anxiety. And at the time we were thinking about this, the National Academies came out with a report urging that that we begin to develop the capacity to research and understand these phenomena and the implications it can have for all aspects of society. So the point of this program is to encourage research to look at new and emerging technologies and try and understand the consequences or the unintended consequences that can occur in all aspects: health, welfare, equity, and ethical challenges. So we ask that the projects include a broad swath of disciplinary approaches, including sociology, so ethical, cultural, legal, journalism, communication, and these kinds of things to understand these things. Some of the type of technologies or advancements we are interested in include gene editing and gene drives, nanotechnology, big data and AI, machine learning, and implication of autonomous technologies. So it's you get the idea that it's the whole range of kind of exciting emerging technology that have potentially lots of benefits, but also raise all kinds of questions about the unintended consequences. And so there's a need for a broad variety of social science to look at these problems. So that's what that program is about. It's pretty cool, I think. So now those are all the agriculture economics in rural communities programs. So now we'll just hit on some other program areas that may be of interest to you and are related to sort of ag econ approaches. And in fact, the CARE program is one in which classic ag extension research have a real strong role to play in this. This is a program area 1701. There's short-term projects 1 to 3 years, so 300,000 budget is allowed for those. They must be integrated. They must have a research and extension component, and they also involve standard and phase grants. The due date is June 17th for that, and Jim Dobrowski is the guy to talk to. What else do we have? Oh, so there's more about that. It's really, the point of it is to attack some critical challenges where research is needed to solve some basic, say, production problem, and then using extension to get it out and get it integrated into the community. So stakeholders are a very important part of the research process. To understand what some of the challenges are, whether they be technical or social or market or whatever they may be. And so we very strongly encourage the role of a stakeholder in these projects. Look at the RFA to see more about this and talk to Jim. Next we have data science. Has this got these going on here? Okay, so Anne, you want to jump in on this?
Great, I'd be happy to talk a bit more about this cross-cutting program. It's called Data Science for Food and Agricultural Systems. I'm a new national program leader here at NIFA in Stapleton, and I'm the lead NPL for this, and there's a team of folks. And we have my contact information and our program code contact information below. So this is the program area priority code A1541. The prior name for this program with somewhat different priorities was FACT. So this year, budgets are up to $650,000. There's a coordination innovation network with special requirements for additional coordination that has a budget of $1 million per project for project periods of up to 5 years. So the project types include research and integrated. So next slide. Standard, conference, and phase. Conference, as with all AFRI conferences, has a letter of intent process. So please read more about that if you're interested in a conference in this area. If you go back a bit, I'll mention one more thing about the slide before.
Yeah, I had to go back.
All right, we'll go on then. And this actually gets to a key point about this cross-cutting program. This is a program that spans both of these fields, data science and agricultural fields of research. So the funding priorities are data science to enable systems and communities to effectively utilize data, improve research management, and integrate technologies. And the most competitive proposals will be equally well-grounded in agricultural science and data science. So here, that's a key criteria, and it's one that I am often asked about. These applications also must fit the priority areas, and I just gave you the header for the priority areas here. Please look at the RFA for details of this and make sure that your project would fit. So in the general category of analysis, multi-scale connections, and agricultural applications. So there's also a couple of special emphasis areas that you should look at in the AI priority area, for example. You'll also want to look at the details if you're interested in a coordination innovation network project. Sue. Please let us know, reach out to us if you have questions about this program. We're happy to help.
Thanks, Ann. That's great. Okay, I'll go on from there. Other related programs, there's the AgriBility program. This is a small program that provides assistance to ag producers with disabilities, and provides education and networks and direct assistance through this. Oh yes, a maximum $600 or $720 per for 4-year projects. Brad Ryan is your guy to talk to about that. The next one is the Beginning Farmer Rancher program. Dennis, do you want to say anything about that, or I can cover it? But this is it's not a research program so much as it's about developing educational training, technical assistance activities to help beginning farmers, ranchers get into business. That's a maximum funding of $700,000 for 3 years. And Dennis Abu Dhabi is the program director for that. And there's a link to the RFA for that program. The next one is the Small Business Innovation Research Program, the SBIR. This is a government-wide program. It's designed to help promote and develop technologies appropriate for small, mid-sized operations. There's a phase 1 and phase 2. The phase 1 is a maximum of $100,000 for 8 months, and phase 2 is $650,000 for 2 years. Again, Dennis is your guy to talk to about that. SARE, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Extension Program, is a regionally based program. There's 4 regions for that, and that again develops both the capacity and technologies for sustainable agricultural research activities, and on the ground training for farmers, ranchers, graduate students, professionals, and other types. And so Vance Owen is the contact for that, and there's more information on that. So quickly, just as an overview, these are various links that you can go to get additional information about AFRI in general, the types of programs, the eligibility, and just everything you need to know. It's really imperative that you look at the RFA to get an understanding of what's offered and how to go about the business. The last thing I want to say, and I wish I had this on a slide, but just a couple of key points to remember. Read the RFA. First of all, really, it's important that you read the RFA and follow the instructions for developing and submitting applications. I mean, for example, all materials must be in a PDF. Word documents will not be accepted, and the whole application is thrown out as a result. So it's critical that you read the RFA and follow the instructions. In writing your narrative, in your proposal, you want to write clear and compelling language, easy to understand. It's not really the time to impress everybody with your technical capability. You want to be able to clearly get across what it is you're trying to do and how you're going to do it. So quality of writing really matters. That's the first comment reviewers make in the panel process. The first thing they say is, well, this was a well-written proposal. So that really matters. And also you remember each reviewer is reviewing 12 to 14 proposals. So the easier it is for them to read and understand and appreciate what your proposal is trying to do, the better it is for you. So it's really important to do that. And the best way to really get an idea of what good proposals look like and understand the whole review process is to serve on a panel. I've seen that time and again where early career professionals serve on a review panel. They really kind of get the understanding of how the process works and what a good proposal looks like. And they have been successful in subsequent years as a result of that. So that's one of the best pieces of advice I can give you. The other is to take the time to get things squared away, working with your sponsored programs office to make sure that they know that you have a proposal coming. They'll tell you when they want it due. They often want them a week before the due date. So there's no problem getting all the materials together and getting in on time. And that's really just an important thing to do. You know, glitches happen. The only exceptions for late proposals are if you are in a region where suffering a hurricane or some natural disaster, or if grants.gov is down for technical reasons, something wrong with its server or something like that. No other exceptions. There are no other excuses. So get the proposal in on time. Lastly, I say again, I'm open to hear your ideas. As I said, this is to me, this is the best part of the job is listening to good research ideas and talking about that. So please contact me if you have any questions about how to proceed and what you want to do. And that is all I got. So.
Thank you, Robin. I thought I'd jump in right now to make sure we introduce everybody to the audience on other experts that we have here with us today from Ag Systems in support of AERC programs. First of all, Robin, thank you very much. He's presented everything so far. And we had a guest from outside of Ag Systems. That's Ann Stapleton, and she leads the data sciences program, cross-cutting program that you heard about. Also with us today is Dennis Ebadagi. So he's listening in, and we'll be able to answer a few questions that come in. Dennis is the NPL national program leader that leads some of these, such as the small and medium-sized farms, also the SBIR and the Beginning Farmer and Rancher program. And then we have two program specialists from Ag Systems that are with us today. Dr. Desiree Rucker is listening in, and I'm sure that I think that she's been monitoring some of the Q&A as well, and so she'll be providing answers for those questions. And then we have Dr. Katie Densman. Katie just recently joined us as a program specialist and is also part of the team. So I think we'll just open it up right now for questions. If you have questions verbally, jump in. I don't know if it's Desiree that's going to be coordinating this or if it's Robin or Dennis, but I'll just listen in. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to be reading off any questions that come up in the chat for you guys to answer. So I'll start with the first ones and work down the list and go through it that way. And if you have any answers or input, anyone on the panel can jump in. So our first question is, how often is the project director meeting over the whole span of the project period? And is that in DC or Kansas City?
So that'll vary by program, certainly. I imagine Dennis does it differently. For many of these programs, we try to have them in conjunction with the AAEA meetings in the summertime. Not always, but we try to do that because that's where people tend to be. And so I have a pre or post conference day for people to present their work and talk about what's going on. I haven't made plans to do that this summer, and it still remains to be seen whether it will be in Austin or virtual. But that's what we often do with these because it is more convenient for people. They find I've gotten mostly positive response from doing that. I don't know, Dennis, did you want to talk about what you've done as well? Dennis, Mary.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
I was trying to get it off the mute. Yeah, I believe you are right in all the descriptions you made. And of late, we have not been able to have one because of the pandemic. But hopefully by next year, we can begin to get some in place. And it's usually a good idea to have them beside a national conference. So that's what we've done in the past.
Okay, next.
Okay,
you.
fantastic. So next question, in regards to the research only projects, can you have a small extension component or will none be supported at all? And this is specifically in reference to the economics, markets, and trade program area.
Well, as I said, the extension component cannot be funded, cannot be supported. I suppose you can have some kind of activity that is, some extension-like activity, but you'll have to carve it out of the project. It can't be part of the funded part of the project. So it's probably not a good idea. I mean, it raises concern for reviewers about what will be the allocation of effort for the PI and co-PIs in the project. So it's probably better not to do that. But that is an example of something where, depending on the subject matter, talk to me about what you have in mind, what the project would be about, and maybe it would be a better fit in one of the other programs.
Okay, thank you. Next question, for economics, markets, and trade, how do you view a multi-state / multi-institution research project versus a one-state focused research project?
So that's a good question. That's often asked. Because we always talk about multiple this, multiple that, as if that's some kind of extra special thing. We like that. We like multidisciplinary things where you're bringing more to addressing the problem. It doesn't get preference. So it's viewed equally. It's really about the quality of the proposal, the research idea, the probability of success, the implementation, all that. So while multiple institutions are a good thing, if appropriate, it's not necessarily, it doesn't get extra points in the review process relative to a single institution or single individual.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How will the timeliness of COVID-19 related proposals be evaluated? In other words, how do we balance the urgency of getting farmers up-to-date info with being realistic about how long the research and extension process takes?
That's a really good question, because I've thought about that myself, and in some sense, COVID is a critical issue of urgent and significant importance. But we hope it's transitory, and it will not itself be an issue down the road, especially as research comes out. And so, but the relationship between humans and zoonotic diseases and the transfer of these types of things, I don't think that problem is going to go away at all. And being prepared to understand sort of the economics of these things and how institutions and individuals in production might adjust to it. Those types of questions will be with us. So I think given the time lag in doing research, I would tend to want to cast the approach to the problem from a longer term perspective, not specifically geared to COVID-19. Hope that is helpful.
Oh, there we go. So next question. For environmental economic research related to agricultural production, such as the impact of climate change on yields, which program would be more appropriate, BNRE or AERC?
Well, so unfortunately, the Environment and Natural Resource Economics program does not exist. That was pulled because of the absence of an economist NPL for some time. So what I'm trying to do is within the economics, markets, and trade program, because as I mentioned, so viewing that as applied microeconomics, environmental and natural resource economics is a component of that. And so you want to submit it to the economic, markets, and trade program. And I was hoping we'd get in the RFA that you would put in the title, an ENRE project. So we know that that's the orientation. And assuming we have sufficient number of those, we'll try and review those appropriately. So that's where to send the environmental and natural resource economics program project proposals to the economics, markets, and trade. I hope that is clear.
Okay, next question. What is an example of an ideal conference funded through AFRI? Does it need to be national, regional?
Yeah, well, so first of all, AFRI is a national program. It's intended to address issues of national importance. So that's the starting point. So that question applies to all things AFRI, whether it's a conference grant or a project. However, something that's of say regional importance that can have national implications or be transferable and thought about as applicable to a broader scope, that certainly helps. And but again, even if it's strictly regional, I say a New England focus that where the problems don't apply elsewhere, a compelling case for why this needs to be done and it applies to this large region, that's fine. But again, a good case needs to be made. But so that's sort of the distinction. It's a little bit fuzzy, but anyways, I hope that answers it.
I would add a little bit more that there are details about conference application requirements in the RFA. So please pursue look at those really carefully. It's a short section, but all the words are important. Yeah. So definitely take a close look at that. And typically we would expect the usual things from a conference in the sense of a product that can be talked about, a way to document the outcomes, just the kinds of things that you might expect from any conference proposal. But definitely check the RFA and then correspond with the national program leader even before you send a letter of intent.
Yeah, and there's funding restrictions. There's a maximum of $50,000 for the award, and it can be only used for well, it can't be used for salaries and no overhead, but it can be used for travel. Page charges if you have a special issue of publication proceedings, things like that. Support international travel. That's often a question we often get. So that's what it's for.
Yeah, Robin, if I may chime in, a logic model is not required.
Yeah, for conference grants. Yeah, yep.
Great, thank you. And that actually kind of leads into the next question. Are there additional guidelines available about the items that go into the application? I'm wondering about the level of detail that goes into the logic model and management plan.
Well, there is there's links within the RFA to different sort of frequently asked questions, items about page length, and the basic sections that need to be in the proposal. So I would encourage you to look there. I don't know, I think you require logic models for integrated projects. Dennis, do you want to talk about that some more?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Robin. In terms of that, there is an example in the NIFA website, a sample model, and it's always good to have it in a graphic model because we have received proposals where a logic model is written in words. And it's always better to have it in a graphic format so you can see the layout right from the situation to the outcomes. So, I mean, that's very important. But if you go to an NIFA website, there's a sample logic model.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Do programs need to have an on-farm component if addressing small rural communities?
Are you talking about, well, if you're talking about the Rural Economic Development Program, as we indicated, that's really about post-farm gate activities. So other sort of non-farm, non-agricultural activities. If you meant by rural development, if that's the type of program you were talking about, now, I mean, it may include some agricultural activities, but that's not the focus of the orientation of that program. And if you're talking about in the small and medium-sized farm case, I'm not sure how to answer. Dusty, you want to respond to that?
No, I believe you have responded to it accurately.
Okay. Okay.
Great, and definitely everyone feel free to ask a follow-up question.
Right, yeah.
If you feel that's necessary, and I'll catch that. Okay, I was wondering if you would be able to provide more examples or what kinds of topics you would be looking for natural resource and environmental economics topics in the economics, markets, and trade program.
Yeah, I certainly will. It's certainly an area of a priority, obviously, of President Biden is dealing with climate change near, medium, and long term, and there are very important challenges associated with that. One of the areas that we've given a lot of attention to in the recent past, anyway, is looking at valuing ecosystem services, the changes in ecosystem services, and that's something that I think we're interested in the context of climate change, because that certainly has some bearing on how these ecological functions work, and what benefits and costs there are associated with these damages and these impacts. So doing the environmental evaluation of that sort of thing. We've also supported research looking at conservation programs, NRCS type of activities, and ways of evaluating these type programs, and one is developing incentive mechanisms for farmers to adopt conservation practices, that sort of thing. So you can imagine in the whole natural resource arena, how agriculture interfaces with the environment and natural resources, and how those how you can mitigate some of the damages associated with that. So that, I mean, I hope that kind of touches on it for you.
Yeah, Robin, I would put in carbon markets into the list of examples as well as something that's a hot topic that we would be interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. How to develop those efficiency aspects,
right.
Whole range of things. Yeah, that's quick.
Great, thank you. Next question, can you have a smaller research only project for about 300K?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. In fact, up until it used to be the max used to be 500,000, and taking out conference grants, I think the average was probably closer to 400,000. So they do range all over. But certainly, again, it's about the strength of the idea, implementation, probability of success, that sort of thing. So those are the type of criteria that it's evaluated on. So it doesn't need to be as big as you can get it to be, dollar-wise.
Okay, next question. Where does the development of renewable energy like wind and solar fit into agriculture categories? Would it be in rural development, or does it depend on the nature of the research question?
Exactly. It depends on the nature of the research question. And I always often say this to PIs: think about what's the core aspect of what you're dealing with. If it's how does this thing, this technology or what have you, contribute to rural development, economic development, well-being, then it probably belongs in the rural economic development program. If the core of it is as an economic development strategy. If it's about the economics of alternative energy sources and the development of markets, or whatever it might be, in this case, the economics, markets, and trade would capture that for certain. Because it's both about markets and about now about the environment and natural resource economic issues.
Okay. How flexible are the priorities laid out in the call for proposals? Said differently, if we have a project that is closely related but not exactly, how will the project be evaluated for fit?
Good. I'm glad you asked that question, because in the RFA, the typical language is these are like areas of interest, but not limited to. So these are the items listed in the RFA really are some of them are areas that we are definitely interested in, but other than that, it's really to give a flavor of the type of projects or the concepts that we're interested in. So again, anything that's a good, compelling idea that fits within the general program area is appropriate. So it needn't be anything that's listed in those topics.
I think that's a good question. We put a lot of effort when we're drafting RFAs to the term that we use is not being overly prescriptive in the language. So as those documents are reviewed before they're released or published, we've gone over them with that in regard. So the point is we try not to be to overfit those to restrict good ideas that might be coming from applicants.
Right. Because I mean, this is the foundational program, and so as such, it's about developing new knowledge that's foundational. So.
Okay, next question. How innovative do ideas have to be in SBIR to be competitive? Can it be an adaptation of an existing initiative? Can it be about ag marketing and not just ag production, e.g. a new concept for local food distribution?
Yeah, adaptation of existing idea is a great one. Being able to retrofit a material so that it can be usable for the wider public. For example, you have a combine, which is big, and most small farmers are not able to afford a combine unless you're in a cooperative where you can rent one. But then you have engineers who have manufactured the handheld combine, which are good for grain, to harvest grain. So it's a question of the idea and the innovation, and eligibility is strictly for profits. Other groups can serve as collaborators in submitting SBIR proposals.
Thank you.
There's a second part of the question about ag marketing versus ag production, and if the concept could be related more to ag marketing side. Kevin, I think you're on mute.
Is that an SBIR question again, or?
Yeah, that's part of the SBIR question.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, Dennis might be best to answer this because he's seen the proposals, but I would think that marketing would be also an important component of these that could come forward.
That is correct, Kevin.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, would you recommend putting one's objectives into the activities section of the logic model? The project narrative asks for objectives and long-term goals, while the logic model contains activities, outputs, and outcomes. Would long-term goals in the narrative equate to long-term outcomes in the logic model? Thank you.
I can take that. It's always best to look at a sample And then when it comes to the outcomes, look at the short term, mid-term, and long term. You know, you want to put them in such a way that the reviewers know what you're talking about. Don't try to confuse the reviewers, because the more you try to confuse them, then your scores are not going to be very high. So again, please look at the sample we have on our NIFA website. That is a very good sample.
And just to emphasize a point, keeping the reviewers happy. Certainly, you don't want to annoy them. So that's a good thing to keep in mind as you develop your proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. It seems like the small and medium-sized farms program has shifted to focus mostly on the economics. Where might proposals focused on health and well-being of the farm population fit now?
Same place. Same place. Yeah. Oh, you got you can take it, Dennis.
Well, I mean, the most important thing when you look at small and mid-sized farms, you have to deal with which audience am I working with? And when we talk about small farms, you are not talking about the size. According to the Economic Research Service farm typology, you don't go by the size, but by the gross revenue to determine if it's a small or mid-size. So gross revenue of 350,000 or less is small. Gross revenue between 350,000 and 1 million is mid-size. Over 1 million is large. So up to 5 million, then beyond that is very large. So you need to take that in mind when you're looking at the different categories. In terms of small farm, it doesn't depend on 200 acres or 100 acres, but on the gross revenue, the gross cash farm income of that very farm family.
Another thing to add, and I think, and that's what I think I'm getting with the aspect of your question is if again, this is getting at what's the core research questions you're after, and if you want to address the health and well-being of people in rural areas, that would be one that could be appropriate for the rural economic development program, because it doesn't, in that, if the core aspect of it is, the health and well-being, it doesn't really matter if they're farmers or not farmers, but you're interested in the well-being of people in rural areas. So I mean, it's really not a nuance. It's just the difference. If the question is about health in this case versus economic viability, those different type of questions. Anyways, I hope that illuminates your question.
Okay, next question is, could you discuss the additional $150,000 for partners?
Yeah, that is as new this year, I guess. I'm not sure if it was available last year. And the idea is to bring in a partner, a co-PI from a minority serving institution, either something that's EPSCoR eligible, Hispanic serving institution, small institutions, I think are below 14,000 students. I can't remember what the cutoff is, but to build those individuals in as part of the project. This is sort of a way to expand the developing these research relationships among these individuals, and so we want to encourage that type of partnership. And so we're adding additional financing to do that. So that's the idea behind that.
Okay, and then the last question for now, and again, if anyone has any additional questions or follow-up questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. If a project was recommended for funding 2 to 3 years ago, but did not receive funding, could major parts of it that are still relevant in this RFA be used? If so, should we mention that it was recommended for funding in the past? Thank you.
That it was not recommended for funding in the past.
So it says that the project was recommended for funding, but did not receive funding.
Huh. That's a new category. Well, let me answer it this way.
Robin,
Yeah.
I suspect, let me make a comment that will help you answer your question. I suspect that it was maybe medium priority or above, but below the funding line. So
Right.
everything medium priority and above is recommended for funding, but there's not sufficient funding to secure it.
Right. And so you can resubmit the proposal or well, actually, Mark, stay there, because I was going to say you could resubmit proposal and you get an additional page to describe how you responded to the reviewer comments. So that's one option. But if you're talking about actually providing a new proposal that contains components of an old proposal, I think I would call that a new proposal, and then you needn't treat it as a resubmission. Would that sound right to you, Mark?
Yes, I always recommend communicating that issue directly with the program leader and come to an agreement with the program leader so that you're both on the same page, and that information could be transmitted to the panel.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to submit a proposal as a new proposal and the program leader considers it a resubmission, or vice versa. Because that's important for the program leader overseeing the program to be able to transmit the correct information to the panel as well. Because sometimes panels say, I saw this before, I think I saw this before, but it's not marked as a resubmission. And then the program leader can say, we discussed it in a consultation and we agreed that it was a new proposal and not a resubmission, or a resubmission and not a new proposal, whatever the agreement is. I mean, that's how I always handle it.
Yeah, Robin, if I may add, in a resubmission, the applicant needs to go back and look at the request for applications to ensure that a lot of the ideas may have changed from when that proposal was initially submitted. We have seen applicants who have been declined from the proposals being reviewed because they did not read the RFA very well to know that the maximum allowed for the project has changed from 750,000 to 600,000. And they're asking for 750,000, which means from the get-go, that proposal is not going to be reviewed.
Yeah, I mean, we can't emphasize enough the importance of reading the proposal. It's a big document, and there's a lot to get through, but it is important that you do that and look for it to make sure that your proposal, your application is viable. You don't want it to be thrown out because of something. And if you have questions, again, part of the reason we put up the contact information is feel free to contact us with questions about any part of the process.
That's all the open questions we had for now. If anyone else has any, feel free to pop them in there. We still have about 15 minutes. I will go through and read off some of the answers to questions that have been typed into the Q&A, just in case anyone had the same question and would like to know the answer. So we had a question, how can we serve on a panel? And Desiree answered that and said, in order to serve on a panel, you're more than welcome to reach out to the program staff listed for a specific program. And you can email them and let them know which program and a brief description of who you are and your background.
Send your CV.
And send your CV. And then we also had a question, can you serve on a panel and apply for a program? And Desiree answered that if you're going to apply for 2021, you cannot serve on the 2021 panel.
You can apply to a different program, but you can't serve on the same panel program as
the program you applied for, right?
Say, Robin, this might be a good time to stop sharing the PowerPoint. Then we can broaden it out.
I will do that.
Great.
What is the best way and the best time to contact program staff to discuss the fit of a project with the program? And Desiree answered the best way is to contact by email and schedule a meeting. Typically, we are available Monday through Friday. Let them know the program area you are considering in the subject line, and we can address your questions quickly.
Yeah, and we ask that you provide, a short synopsis, page describing your idea and what it's about, so we have can think about it ahead of time how to respond to it.
And we had a couple questions about what sort of conferences or other projects get funded or have been funded in the past. And Desiree answered that there is a site, it's cris.nifa.usda.gov, and she popped that into the question page, or you can just search CRIS NIFA, and you can search for projects that have been funded previously in specific program areas and get some information that way. Or you can reach out to the national program leader to discuss that in more detail.
We support, conferences with, various professional societies, all kinds of things. So.
Okay, it looks like we have two more open questions now. So we have a question, are LGBTQ plus farmers included in the socially disadvantaged farmers category?
True, yes.
That question. No, socially disadvantaged, these are groups that have been subject to discrimination. So Black, Hispanic, Native Americans, and others that the secretary deemed appropriate in that category.
And the other one just got answered in the chat. Okay, and it looks like that's pretty much all of it. So any other questions, go ahead, or anything else that any of the panelists wants to add? Oh, we have one more question. So who makes the funding decision, program director or the panel?
It's in essence the panel. The process in brief is all of the panel, each reviewer reviews 12 to 14 proposals. They give them initial rating. We accumulate those ratings and get to what the distribution of ratings are. We figure out basically where the lower tail is in the distribution. These are the ones that are just no chance of getting funded. The remaining are discussed in panel. There's a primary reviewer who provides an overview of the proposal, and a secondary and a tertiary that adds additional comments. They come up with an initial ranking of the proposal that is excellent, high priority for funding, medium priority for funding, and on down. We get that initial distribution of those rankings, and then at the end of the panel process, we talk about where things are placed and basically work out the whole array proposals by their rank. And then, so that's done with the discussion of the panel manager and the panelist, and they arrive at what this distribution looks like. And then it's basically how much money is available for that program, and you exhaust those funds to fund those projects. So it's a democratic process.
Well, I see we still have 65 people logged on. It's been a great discussion and good audience. Now would be a good time to send us any additional questions you might have.
Well, one thing I would conclude with is these couple of points. Make sure you get it in on time. It's well written. And if you are uncertain as to the appropriate program, about fit, we highly encourage you to talk to one of us about that. We can help you sort of think through where might be the best place for it. Yeah, serving on a panel. I mean, just because I've explained now the process doesn't mean it's still a good idea. It is still a good idea to serve on a panel. I've seen it time and again where people have become successful because of that.
Okay, we have just 2 more questions quick. Can you remind us about the deadlines for this year's proposals? Thank you.
Let's see if I can. Let's see. Small and medium-sized farms are due June 24th. This is in the RFA, but I'll help you out anyway. The markets and trade is July 15th. Rural economic development, June 17th. And social implications, July 15th. 5 o'clock Eastern.
And then we have, forgive me if you've answered this already, but will a recording of this webinar be available afterward? And they probably also want to know where.
I don't know. Olivia, are you?
We are recording these sessions and they will be made available on, hopefully you went to that page that lists all of the different sessions for this webinar series. We'll put the recordings on there. We're also going to take the content of all the slides and put it into a handout. And all of this information will be available on that page, but we will also email it to all of the registered participants from the sessions.
No charge.
Got it. Thank you. Another question. Will applied economics go to the markets and trade program? Thank you.
Yes.
Any additional questions? Well, if not, at this point in time, feel free to reach out to all the folks that you've learned about and met today, and we'd be happy to answer your questions and give you the best advice we can for you to be successful. With that, I think it's time for us to conclude, and thank you all. Thank all the panelists, but also thank our audience for joining us. Good luck.
Thank you. Hope to see you in Austin.